Hi, it's Grave Girls. I'm Danielle, and it's our show. We're going to do our show. So, just so you know, I'm going to do a show within a show. Whenever Charlie isn't here, I'm doing this little series called Tips from the Grave. Tips from the Grave. You know? So, yeah, that's a thing. So, today we're going to do one. It's going to be, I guess, like, sort of the first one. I've done a few of these, so I'll just kind of backlog them into a playlist for you. But today I wanted to talk a little bit about like musical workflow in general and some of the stuff that Grave Girls does. So let's go. I don't know why I had to sound like, Mario or something just now. Let's go. But anyway. With workflow, I think that really traditionally in music, I guess you could say like conventionally in music, there is two separated like ways you can go about workflow. And the first one would be like physical performance is what I might call it. And then the second one is more like electronic performance. So there's different aspects of both of those worlds. Having been someone who grew up in the punk scene, like playing bars before I was, before the laws changed, when I was young, and all that stuff. I cut my teeth on the punk scene, that's why they're all crooked. So when I met Charlie, the other half of Grave Girls, who, isn't here, basically, when I met Charlie, I started getting an introduction into the electronic scene a lot more, because that's where she worked. So she worked in the electronic scene. I grew up in the punk scene, and so we got together and made Grave Girls. So with that in mind, workflow from a physical performance aspect, or rock music, punk music, anything where it's all about the performers and the performances, you see a lot of different stuff happen. You see a lot of really interesting, moving emotions from people. I think one thing a lot of people get wrong about like emo music in particular is that or what you could categorize as emo music, whether it's a time period, genre, etc. One thing people get wrong about it is that, all music should be emotive and expressive on a certain level, and so you're going for, again, just like any other heavy music genre, you're going for a certain intensity. So there's that. And, that's how I have played my parts. For a long time. I've actually been, I've been told I'm a legendary performer. It's kind of fun, but I worked really hard to do the things that I've done. And a lot of times I was in bands where there was a lot of complicated things, like kind of working together in a very tight way between different people. And you did what you could to keep the explosion moving forward, in whatever simplest terms as far as that goes. But with the workflow, you're constantly doing something. You're constantly like performing a suspension of disbelief about your performance, and like regardless of how you feel as a person that day, the performance you are giving out to people and the vibe it brings is going to be everything to them. You gotta kind of see it that way. So from a performance aspect like that, it's very common for people to sing and play guitar, or like to have like a live drummer. A drummer with an acoustic drum set is usually the most common way to go about it. I've seen performance bands with electronic kits. It's less common. So there's that. There's a lot. When you go from a performance aspect, workflow is filled up. It is filled up with your performance and every moment of what you choose to do. A lot of people tend to go the route of complication, which is how I used to go about it when I was younger, honestly. But, people are chasing different things with their art. So I'm not saying don't do complicated music. I love a lot of complicated music. That's one way about it. So when I met up with Charlie for the first time, she was like, hey, you want to go to a show? I'm actually working, and, just, you want to come hang out and do stuff. And, I was lonely at the time. I was like, yeah, let's go. So we headed to this show, and it was an electronic music show with DJs and producers. Now, in the electronic music world, producer is used so frequently for someone who just comes up with the ideas and composes music that it has become ubiquitous with that. So yeah, I would call them producers and DJs. Oftentimes there's it's almost required that there's some kind of lighting or visual element, like projection or like an LED wall or something like that. It's very, very common, if not ubiquitous, for the genre to have visual effect. Whereas from a physical performance aspect, the first one we talked about, there's a lot more of that, the focus is on the performance. And I've even seen, some bands will actually prefer that their music is, well lit. And then in the DJ world, you've got these dimly lit clubs doing, lighting and visuals and stuff like that. So it can be different in that way. But the main difference with workflow in the electronic world is the amount of ease that I would associate with it. Now, some DJs might say, oh, well, that's not the case. We're working hard up there. I'm not saying you're not working hard. That's not what I mean. I agree. You are working hard up there, regardless of how you play it. But realistically, if a DJ were to go crazy, the way that your average, really good, performance metal band, people wouldn't respond to it the same way. There's a certain ease of performance when you're producing. For example, in production and DJ work, I've seen people come up to the stage and get up on the stage to greet the DJ, and the DJ's hands free, shaking their hand or hugging the person and talking with them for a minute while the track plays. Because the thing about with the pros and cons, one of the pros with electronic workflow is that it's gonna go on as long as it's playing. It's gonna go on without you. Whatever it may be. And it just depends on your workflow as an artist. The other thing about it is that in typical punk performance and stuff like that, there's actually a lot of conventions as far as ways that you're supposed to do it. And in the electronic world, there might be a little bit less of a barrier in certain aspects. Now, so I'm seeing all this stuff at this electronic show and realizing, the ease at which the crowd, because the beat is always on. The beat is always going to be on unless somebody messes something up. And so at dance and bass shows, there's a certain ease about it where, you're not worried that something might go wrong. No one's going to break a string. No one's going to mess up their parts or play the wrong song on accident coming up to a part. Or if they do, they're just going to play it off, And then the visual artists will often work independently, in their own way, just kind of interpreting. And it's a really fun mixture. It's brilliant, actually. It's a really fun mixture of things. It's one of the ways that me and Charlie, make money, is by doing visual work with Grave Girls. And, because we have our own shows, obviously, but that's the secret third thing. So just to touch base on that a little bit, with Grave Girls, we are taking intentionally parts of performance culture or like physical performance culture and the punk scene and parts of electronic music culture and, the dance scene. And we're kind of trying to mix them together in our own little way. And that's Grave Girls. So, a good song that might provide an example of like some of our dance influences would be like Lovely Sweater. It's one of my favorite Grave Girls songs. I would encourage you to look it up. Especially, it's a song about euphoria. It's a song that ultimately is about gender euphoria and about loving yourself and accepting who you are. It's a really good song, so go check that out. So, yeah, Grave Girls mixes a lot of electronic workflow, like the world of ease and where the track is just running, with performance culture, where, me and Charlie plays violin in a lot of songs, and I will play guitar or keyboard or modulate with a controller. And I was going to show you the controller and like get into details with that, but I think that's probably good for today for the most part. So yeah, we perform our show and I put on a very, all eyes on me performance with Grave Girls. I am singing all the songs. Sometimes I'm playing guitar or keyboard as well at the same time. Pretty often, actually, I'm playing another instrument while I'm singing because I'm used to that as a performer, but also it's one of Grave Girls' major strengths. And there's a fine line of like measuring the ease at which we want to, add in like predictable elements into our music. For example, just the fact that we use a lot of backup stuff where it's electronic and it's not like real, like we don't have a real drummer. Grave Girls doesn't have a real human drummer. It's more of like, electronic culture. And so that's the interesting thing, is that goth music and industrial music has always been seeking to merge these two worlds in a lot of ways. And so there's a lot of cool bands doing stuff like that, and it's one of the reasons, Grave Girls, it's one of the reasons we do what we do. So yeah, this has been probably pretty long. I'm gonna let you go right there, and we'll talk to you next time on Tips from the Grave. Bye, it's Grave Girls, signing out. Goodbye. Salutations. Go watch Lovely Sweater.